Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Reach, Research and Resources to Strengthen Student Motivation. I would just like to know to make sure that everybody can see the screen and hear me. So if somebody want to put a remark in the chat box to let me know that everybody can see and hear. Perfect. Good. Thank you. So welcome again to today's webinar, Reach, Research and Resources to Strengthen Student Motivation. I'm Janice Hostegger, the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Search Institute, and I'm joined today by Mary Schrader, our Client Relationship Manager, and Eric Kalenze, our Director of Education Solutions. We know that your time is valuable, so we want to keep today's webinar within an hour. If you have questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so keep your questions handy or go ahead and send them during the broadcast. We'll get started in just a minute, but I first want to cover a few housekeeping notes. We'll be recording the webinar today, and we'll send out the recording tomorrow, so if you miss something, no problem, we've got you covered. We do have a facilitation guide that was sent out in the reminder emails both yesterday and this morning, and I'll put a link to it. I guess I did put a link to it already in the guide, to the guide in the chat box. So if you didn't get it earlier, you can just click on the link and that should download. Finally, we have a giveaway today. We'll be giving away one free admission to the Strengthening Student Motivation Workshop on June 21st to June 23rd in Minneapolis. So if you want to be entered into the drawing to win that, stay tuned until the very end and we'll select a winner from those still online. So now I'm very happy to introduce Eric Kalenze. As I said earlier, Eric's our Director of Education Solutions here at Search Institute. Eric has spent 10 years as a high school English teacher and has also held positions in administration and in education consulting. He's the author of the book, Education is Upside Down, Reframing Reform to Focus on the Right Problems. He's also a regular contributor to publications such as Education Week and Education Post, among others. So now I'll hand it over to Eric to get us started. Eric?
Thanks, Janice, and welcome everybody. I just wanted to let you know you can feel free to add pretty much anything into the chat window as you like. As questions arise, things like that, we do have a few places built in where we're going to let folks offload that kind of information or questions in kind of a constructed way, but feel free at any time. We have myself, Janice, and Mary all here to hopefully address them in real time and or circle back to them if they're of a more detailed nature. But again, welcome. And we're really glad that you are interested in learning more about REACH and the work we're doing with schools to really effectively look at student motivation and improve it. Today's webinar is really an overview of how REACH goes about what it does, as well as what it's done so far, and where you can learn more from there. So that said, this is just kind of the journey we'd like to go on today in terms of like stops over our webinar agenda. We're going to do this little time to introduce things. We're going to do a little framing exercise to kind of kick things off. And then we're going to go a little bit into just like a few brief research points that should serve as a little bit of a justification when it comes to why we choose to focus on really explicitly improving student motivation, and then move a little bit into just how the REACH research and resources can kind of help schools on that journey, and what it really is, plus how you can learn more about it. Those pieces will all be featured here, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. And as Janice said, hopefully we're keeping that within an hour time frame or so. Now, in terms of those introductions, as Mary said, I'm your presenter, Eric, and I am the Director of Education Solutions. Have been working for about the past 10 years in kind of like the school improvement space, so really helping schools with their strategic planning and choosing the right solutions and getting those kinds of improvement initiatives off the ground. And I've done a lot of work around the country and and in contact with folks from all over. So it's really great to be here at Search doing that. I'm joined by Mary today, who's our client relationship manager. I also have her email address there if you want to note that. She is a great person to reach out to if any of your questions about what could this look like in my school, how can I get more information right away about things like workshops, materials, professional development. She's your great first stop. And then there's Janice, whose voice you heard earlier. She's our marketing communications manager. She also would be great to reach out to if you have questions about how it can be messaged to your staff. If you have feedback about the webinar itself, point it Janice's way, and you see her email there below. Now, to kind of start things, I want to start with a little bit of a framing exercise. Okay, so before we kind of dig into the why of reach and the what of reach, let's think about ourselves just a little bit to just kind of get ourselves in the right frame of mind for this motivation work. And what I'd like you to do is, and if you have the facilitation guide there, you can also look on there, but call to mind a personal example of something you were motivated to succeed at and that you achieved. Okay, so that you've actually finished. And you can proudly say, I achieved that. In your facilitation guide, you'll see some spaces there. There's a little diagram. If you would record the answer to number 1 in the box on the right, you'll see it's kind of got a sunburst around it, but write in there, please, the thing that you achieved. And from there, name 1 to 3 obstacles or setbacks you encountered along the way to that achievement in the spaces provided here. Okay, so you'll see just little bumps in the road, as it were. Obstacle, setback, 1, 2, and 3. And then below that, and again, just very briefly, is all that's necessary. Only you're seeing this, and we're not collecting it or anything. But finally, briefly describe how you got past each obstacle. And maybe these were people you consulted for extra help. Maybe these were someone you had to reach out to borrow money to pay for additional education, or I needed to get a tutor for a degree I was trying to get, what have you. Just basically, what did you do to overcome the obstacle or setback? And again, as that's all your own information, and there's no formal requirement here or anything, we'll just kind of move on, but you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. Basically, what we'd love to know, if you're able and you're right next to a keyboard, if you would type a brief summary of that aspiration to achievement experience in the chat box. Something that looks a little like this. My achievement was blank, and an obstacle I faced was blank, and I overcame the obstacle by blank. Just give us one. I'm kind of curious what might come up on the chat box there, and that I could kind of take a look at what sorts of achievements folks are sharing. Just curious, Janice, are you able to see the chat box? Because I can't from here. Do we have any examples popping up?
I do actually. My achievement was a classroom walkthrough with Rich Patterson. Let's see what else. My achievement was graduating with my BA from from Sonia. My achievement was an advanced degree. Uh, let's see here, my achievement was joining a dance company. Well, that sounds cool.
Yes.
So we do have a few coming in here.
Cool. Has anybody shared associated obstacles or things they had to do to get past them?
Yeah, so my obstacle was fear of commitment.
Mm.
Um, let's see, my obstacle, I gotta pull up in my screen here a little more here. Um, my obstacle I faced was time management. Uh, I overcame the obstacle by seeking family and friend support. So I overcame the obstacle by proclaiming it publicly. So that was the fear of commitment.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
got some interesting answers here.
Yeah. And again, thanks for kind of just filling those gaps in. We don't need to, labor over too many of them, but even just from the brief examples that are shared, what I'm really driving at by having folks think about it in terms of this is as adults, we're relatively closed loops. We can look back at things we achieved. I mean, we're all growing, of course, but we can look back on things we achieved and then kind of detail out for ourselves the obstacles we had, whether I had to become a better time manager in order to reach my goal of earning my advanced degree while holding a full-time job. So I was going to have to ask other people for help in order to keep me on track. Or I knew I was going to have to do something to hold myself more accountable when I had a fear of commitment. So I publicly declared my intentions, and I made people hold me to it, like those sorts of things. These are the things motivated people do to overcome setbacks. Okay, the thing is, it's very easy in large part to look back on it. We can look back on it and see what happens, but one of the things we kind of know from all of our research kids is they necessarily can't. Okay, some can foresee them, but as they're kind of learning how to be motivated and how to succeed within the world and within the expectations that the world has of them, they need some assistance really working out how to stay on track, how to stay motivated through setbacks, how not to give up when there are setbacks, how to resist taking on thoughts about themselves that could even further detract them from being motivated, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, and so when we talk about how do we approach improving student motivation and academic motivation in particular, we say that we really want to help schools work on better approaches so that they can keep the academic have-tos the same academic have-tos that will really benefit the students, okay, later in life. So, and that's kind of how we approach things, is like, what do we know about human development that can really make us help students become more motivated in more effective ways, basically. Just as everyone in this exercise named something about themselves. Now, as far as, and that's kind of a basic overview of where we're coming from when it comes to the idea of motivation. Helping kids who are not closed loops and can't necessarily look back on successfully achieved experiences toward their own self-determination, their own motivation beyond setbacks. As for why it's kind of like our main focus, and why we focus on improving motivation, is because those batteries that kids come with or don't come with need lots of maintenance. Okay, to stay charged up to do the tough stuff of schooling, you need continual recharging. Sometimes you need to switch out a battery and try a whole new approach to motivating a student. We just really want to figure out what makes those batteries work and give practitioners the best possible tools for replacing a battery when necessary, recharging as necessary, and being able to tell the difference. And that's kind of our focus, is really just making sure those batteries, whether it's for the already motivated student that just needs to keep going through challenge, or a less motivated student that's, their batteries are a little weaker, like how can we get those stronger? And one of the things that we know, if we kind of look at system outputs and we look at kind of how the education system, like diagnoses of various issues in the system, and we start looking at why is motivation so important, there's a number of things we could point to. But something like this, if you look at the annual report that's put out by ACT, so the testing company, with the standardized college entrance exams, they do a lot of reports that also combine statistical information about the student's performance while in high school, and as well as their attitudes and dispositions. Okay, and so when they crunch all those numbers and they start to say what correlates to what, we start to see indicators like these. So something like high school grades, okay, and that's not just an indicator of flat out intellectual ability. That also includes the things you have to do in high school, right? Well, that, as it turns out, when it comes to how you will do in your collegiate GPA, high school grades have the largest of these factors, statistical predictability to how your GPA will turn out in college. Okay, so where we kind of look at that and say, well, highly motivated students do well in high school grades, usually no matter how well they do on the ACT itself. We think that's kind of interesting, that some of these high school outputs actually do correlate with ultimate collegiate success. Also, when we start looking at kind of like the arc of a young person's life, and the developmental psychologists that have followed students from K to 12, and then starts looking at them, it says we start to see that kids' interest and enthusiasm and their motivation for learning, it just naturally deteriorates. Okay, from their entry into kindergarten till the completion of high school, it just basically goes down. And this becomes a really big loss when we start looking at transitions, say from middle school to high school. Okay, you start seeing these bridges where we just we can anticipate that it's coming. Okay, just due to the nature of adolescence, due to the difficulty of transitions from one setting to another, and etc. We have the sorts of things that we can head it off, or we know it's coming, so making a plan might be a good idea. And then plus, when we start also looking at people who study the entire enterprise and look at the sorts of reforms that have been put in place, David Panescu, and this was a paper also co-authored by Carol Dweck and others, talking about possible solutions to start looking at that would be scalable in terms of they could be brought to more people in the enterprise for lower cost, and feasibly sort of observed, and astutely in that paper, no major reform has prioritized students' psychological experience in school or motivation to succeed, despite the fact that it is ultimately the students themselves who must capitalize on learning opportunities. The message being motivation is it's part profession and it's part on the part of the student, but we have to really maybe figure out how we can do that a little bit better and more planfully. And kind of on those notes, I mean, if we looked at your own school, and I have just a poll here that you can use the interface to respond to these questions, please. Which of the choices below here would describe your concern with student motivation? So not thinking about what the system outputs and the developmental research says or anything like that, but just, in your experience, would you say A, overall, I and my staff are satisfied with our students' levels of academic motivation? Or would you say B, we have a small but manageable issue with our students' academic motivation? C, keeping students motivated is a regular topic of conversation for our staff, but we don't yet have a comprehensive plan for how to strengthen it. We talk about it all the time, in other words, but we're not really we're not doing anything explicitly. Or D, students' academic motivation is a profound issue in our school and we are actively seeking how to address it. If you would you just take a moment to click the poll response? It seems like it fits you the best. I'm just curious how that would turn out for the audience.
So about half the people who have voted right now, so
Mm-hmm.
we'll wait just a minute here.
Okay.
Okay, kind of leveled off here.
Okay.
So let's share the results here. Can you see them, Eric?
Yep.
Okay.
Interesting. 0% are satisfied. And 37% are actively seeking answers. All right, thank you very much. Interesting distribution, but not exactly surprising because we also have a lot of data about how educators feel across the enterprise when it comes to their levels of student motivation. I'll just add them up for you in case you can't see them yourself. In terms of those, if it's on a continuum and C and D were the second most concerned and the most concerned, that totaled 80%. So 43% answered C and 37% answered D, okay, as in folks who are either thinking about it or actively seeking, okay, because that's where they're at. Now, and this is a reason number 4 for us when it comes to why focus on improving motivation, because educators would agree with that sentiment. There's even a lot of educators would say it's the main issue. It could drive every other issue in a school. And in the collective, or the social emotional learning collective, CASEL, does a lot of reports on things like students' social emotional well-being and their learning in those domains. And in 2013 did a pretty major survey that went nationally. It was called The Missing Piece. A lot of interesting information in there about kind of teachers' perspectives when it comes to things like social emotional learning and how to do it best and what needs to be addressed. In that group, 69% of teachers reported that low academic motivation is a problem in their classrooms. Okay, so nearly 7 out of 10 teachers surveyed. And when you put that against other factors that they would name as a notable problem, that was a higher percentage than cited either poor student behavior, bullying, or negative school climate as problems. And my hunch there, though I'm not going to get to talk to every single one of the teachers who was surveyed, was that they would say all of those other problems are usually an outgrowth of poor student motivation or lacking student motivation. So these are the reasons we choose to focus on motivation. It goes down over time. It predicts really good things for the kids, and people are struggling with it quite a lot. Now, one of the things we want to make a caution is that once we start talking about this, that we're going to be this is a soft skills sort of program, or that's what the emphasis is going to be. We like to give a little bit of a caution that the whole cognitive versus non-cognitive is kind of a false dichotomy. At Search, we really believe that it's not an either or, it's a both and I think there's kind of some instructive perspectives on this that came from Carol Dweck, Greg Walton, and Jeff Cohen. There's an interesting report that they did for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You can find this freely online, and I found that there's just really some good pointers in here, and I just think good reminders for all of us that as we're thinking about how to work on social and emotional health, that doesn't mean at the expense of academics. And one of the things that they kind of point out is the goal for all of us, basically, is to get students to think of themselves in school in certain ways in order to want to learn successfully, and to regulate themselves in ways that promote learning. Okay, so learning is always on the table. It's not the sort of thing that gets shelved in order to build motivation, but we stress the idea of being taking effective approaches to building motivation where academic outcomes are still kind of premium. And also, they make the recommendation that all you have to be is more greatly aware of non-cognitive factors, and you can do relatively small things in the classroom that can make a big difference in your students' learning. And so that's a lot of how REACH and our work with student motivation and our interface with schools is bearing out, in that we want to talk to people about how they can keep their academic outcomes important, but just really effectively work on student motivation, and in a way that's very like tailored to their site. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that coming up. But one of the things we acknowledge through all of that is this is more difficult. Sorry, I'll back up there a sec. Kind of moving into the next piece. If we've talked a little bit about why we focus on improving motivation, we have to be real about just how complicated motivation is. And this has to do very much with why REACH is called what it is. We know that motivation from our work with kids, from all we know from the developmental psychological research, from following kids and understanding their tendencies and habits and things like that, we know that it's not something you can just magically improve, usually by pulling one magic lever. Okay, it's made up of many things, and that's where the title REACH comes from. So when we talk about the REACH resources and research, it is a categorized organization of these very important domains that all make up our motivation. Okay, and for instance, I would urge you to look back on the personal achievement that you quickly wrote about to kick off the session. Notice that you probably didn't do the same thing to overcome every setback. Okay, you activated different parts of yourself or different parts of your support system in order to stay motivated and move past setbacks. That's kind of what we're offering, is the point of categorizing items like REACH and the research of REACH. Now, and this is the briefest of overviews, which again, we can go into in greater depth, but this just kind of gives you the high-level view of what the REACH components mean, okay? They are relationships. We are highly motivated by the quality of relationships, okay? So what we mean by that is understanding the ways that relationships with adults and peers impact young people's growth is emphasized greatly through the REACH research and resources. Effort is another piece in the research around effort. With effort and the use of strong strategies, willingness to learn from failure, students can become smarter and more successful in school. In the effort portion of REACH, we focus a lot on how students tend to think of themselves and how that does affect the amount of effort they give. Okay, and how we can more deliberately attempt to get them to put out effort even when they would rather not. Relatedly, aspirations is the A of REACH, and with that we mean that students develop positive visions of their futures and they understand how present choices relate to visions of possible selves. When we work with schools and kind of teaching them about the importance of aspirations to motivation, we talk about this idea of think forward, act now. Okay, because we know a lot about how when we have a target, how it keeps us motivated. And you'd be surprised once you start asking students about what they want to be or the type of person they want to be someday in their life, how few of them have a clear sense of that. So we really try to meaningfully get at that through our aspirations work. And again, look at your own reaching a personal achievement exercise from a bit earlier. That you knew what you wanted kept you motivated, okay? And so we really stress the importance of that. Also, cognition is the C of REACH, and this is things we know about our ability to think about our own thinking. Okay, so we learn to think about our own thinking and manage our learning to practice self-control. Okay, the idea that we have dual systems going on in our brains and our thinking patterns all the time, a hot system and a cool system, or a fast or slow system, depending on how you want to think about it, and really being explicit about that, about those processes, teaching kids what they are, using the language that can help students manage their hot or fast thinking to slow things down and make choices that will ultimately benefit them. The C section focuses very much on that of reach. And then we have the heart section. And heart is shorthand for those things we love to do. And at Search Institute, there's a lot of research we've done on that. Sparks is the term we use for that. The things we love to do and that we're very passionate about, but also our most important values. So our deepest driving factors that owe to our upbringings, our value systems. So heart is kind of a, and we call it kind of a, I do anyway, call it kind of a sister category to the R, or relationships, because it is an effective way to really get to know students better. And we have just kind of activities and professional learning that kind of help the practitioners that work with REACH kind of tease those ideas out in a more constructed way. Okay, so that's kind of the top level of all those things. Now, we have a video here that I just like to show you. It's only about a minute long, and it's from a teacher who is in a school that has been using some of the REACH principles, and I think it does a really very good job of just kind of describing that that in-between place when it comes to there's the academic piece, of course. What we're really seeking in working with academics and improving on academics, but by focusing on the more non-academic or quote-unquote soft parts. And if you can't hear this, by the way, let me know right away, because I had to make some changes to my speakers at the beginning. Okay? What I'm hearing is that no one was able to hear that. Is that right? Janice, could you hear or see that?
Hey, Eric. No, I couldn't hear it at all, but I could see it. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
we have tech support on the way.
Gotcha. Well, and rather than belabor it, I will fill in for you what you said. The teacher there is a math teacher who works with middle grade students. And in his experience, he said that a lot of the work that he does with kids, the setbacks that they encounter, the obstacles, all of those things, the obstacles that they encounter, it's not so much that they don't get the content. It's not that they don't get the content, it's that they are really just working past confidence pieces. Okay, so it's not that he can't necessarily explain the concepts or support them through that. He really just has to work with them on building confidence. And he uses a phrase there that I really like to gravitate on, and he says, I try to get students to realize they have to attack challenges. I think that goes very much with that idea of academic tenacity, is how do you build the proper hunger and and willingness to jump into the tough stuff. And that's really what REACH is about at the end of the day, okay, is making sure that students who feel set back by the difficulties that they face when learning new material, new skills, just don't lose focus without having to dial down the rigor to the point that they aren't benefiting academically. And he kind of talks about walking that balance and really recognizing whether it's a math thing or a confidence thing, and then working on them as such. So sorry I don't have the sound for that, but I hope that's a decent recap of kind of what he was saying. Now, the good news about all this is that we know from the research that it doesn't take a lot, okay? A lot of people hear that, oh, we're going to stress soft skills or building motivation or what have you, and that's another thing on my plate. We don't really see it that way, okay? We really want to see how folks can practice in seemingly small ways to target kids' thoughts, feelings, and belief, much like Yeager and Walton would suggest, is that you can actually get quite big effect size, and you can see achievement raise, and you can see gains that persist months and years later, not necessarily by doing a certain program or starting setting aside all kinds of instructional time, but just sort of changing more how you teach than installing something new. Okay, so and that's kind of how we approach things here. Is our big goal is to be a research to practice solution and strategy, and not necessarily just like a program execution one. And on that note, let's talk. I'm going to talk a little bit here about what REACH is, okay, and how you can learn more. Because to this point, I've really just talked about things like why we do it this way, and why we've organized it into kind of the REACH framework. Are there any? If there are any questions, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here, so I'm just kind of moving along. But by all means, if you have them, I'll do a check with Janice. Janice, have any questions come through that you think are worth addressing or slowing down for at this moment?
We're kind of slow on questions at this point, but if you have some, please push them through. We'd love to have Eric answer them for you.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. If there aren't any at the moment, let's take a peek at exactly what REACH is, because I've talked a lot about the framework and why it's built this way and why it's our chosen emphasis. But I haven't really told you how it works or what it is. And as I say, it is a system of research resources and professional learning that we want to use to help aid schools in strengthening their kids' academic motivation. As I kind of was just leading up to, that could be a form of a highly scripted curriculum where people drop off the books and the DVDs, and you make time in your advisory period for the kids to go through it. That's one way of doing it. Or you could just send your folks to lots of learning workshops and hope it all happens. We see ourselves kind of right in the middle of that, okay? We promote research-based practices, and it's supported by practical tools. We have activities that can be done, but really we stress that idea of adjusting practice, baking it into everything, not necessarily just executing. And in terms of what those resources are, we have measurement tools, like we have a survey that the kids can take, so you can get a little bit of a bead on kind of what some of their REACH aligned dispositions, attitudes, things like that are, to help you make some decisions. We also have a strategies guidebook, and that strategies guidebook has kind of digest versions of the research itself, plus a number of activities, 20 activities, in fact, that you can actually deliver in classrooms. And there's kind of the research pages look like this. Basically, we read the research so you don't have to. and give it to you in kind of smaller forms and outline the justifications. Plus, there's all the reference information if you'd like for free. And there are those those lessons that you can actually, they're kind of ready-made for classroom delivery. That's the physical tools that you can take into the classroom. Also, we have professional learning workshops that we have open enrollment ones that are offered several times a year that teams come to us. Plus, we do on-site kind of modular PDs with staff that are really looking to drill down on one issue or two. And that's a lot. That's a big focus of my work. I put this graphic in here when you say, well, so how do you start planning items to move into practice? I walk staffs through these tools that allow them, for instance, when they have they've delivered an anchor activity in their classroom, and we say, okay, that's important for us to build into more consistent practice across a team. What practices can we all agree to make it kind of consistent and kind of surround the kids in a comprehensive experience? So we are trying to go all the way from research into practice, and that just gives you an idea of the tools. Plus, we do all kinds of implementation support. That's a photo of a team that I was working with in one of our schools that is really, they're starting to plan how to go wide in their school. They began with this leadership group that you see here, and next year they're going to a full school implementation of this research and resources, and that's them. I'm facilitating, in that part, I'm facilitating a basic discussion of how they're going to move it into the full school. So basically from guidebook resources to measurement tools to professional learning, there are lots of pieces involved possibly with REACH. Now, if I was to talk about what's in the guidebook, it is, as I say, you get these digest versions of the research that everything's based on, plus the activities. And this piece, REACH techniques. These are suggestions of practices that folks can start using all the time aligned to the research. Okay, so where we have buildings sometimes kind of walk through that and plan their own practices that really fit their setting, there's also just a ready-made list of suggestions about, we know it's important for kids to use good struggle strategies when they are working through challenging material. Here are some things you can do. Okay, that's actually built into every one of our sections as well. Okay. Then that survey that I mentioned, if we're going to take a look at what's in there, that's the front of the report, and basically what these do, it just provides student perspectives on the REACH components. Okay, and it is really to inform improvement decisions only. We give a pre and a post administration, so you can kind of see how kids grew over time, in those various categories, and to kind of gauge impact. Something that we use all the time in the schools we work with to say, okay, which areas should we focus on, at least, because we know which research we really like, and we know which research we find to be really important to be infusing into our school operations, but what do the kids say? And I've seen schools actually kind of change their focus based on what the kids' perceptions were, and those were surfaced by these surveys. Okay, and as for kind of what's in it, you can see all kinds of breakdowns of the, and again, each of the areas is aligned to the REACH research. You get kind of these overall scores with distributions of the kids in terms of where they fell on the scale, and I'm in no way am I giving a large in detail or in-depth reading of what's all in the report, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of these are the types of information you'd have at your fingertips with this survey, and you can kind of see how it fits into the overall system. You also get item level analysis. We break the information from the survey down by demographic and by item. And so this really, in data exercises with staffs that we do, we get down to that level and start addressing which ones are most troubling to us, which ones we see as very positive, which ones are in need of most address, thus and so. And just to give you an idea of how they look, I'm just going to give you a quick tour. Like in some of the categories, the questions are very much geared to the student's experience in the school. Like this is a question or a category from the relationships category, believe in them. And the questions the students would answer would be things like these. My teachers treat me like I am important and valued. My teachers appreciate who I am and what I can do. My teachers make me feel important. And then you get a score, okay? And a distribution of how many students fell into each of the response categories. Similarly, if I were to go to the heart category and this that connects sparks to learning, again, sparks is that thing we really love to do or passionate about. Students responded to questions like these. My teachers try to find out what I'm interested in. My teachers try to connect what we're learning in class to my interests and talents. My teachers help me see how my classwork relates to my sparks. And at this school, it was a 75. Okay, and that's how students were distributed. Okay, so these first two categories I show are very much about the students kind of reflecting on the reach criteria with regard to their school. But this is very developmental and motivation is very internal. So there's also information that the survey includes that have the students reflect on themselves. Okay, so in the aspirations category, for example, students aren't talking about their teacher relationship or their in-school experience. They're saying this is how I tend to do things, and this is also very useful information when you're beginning to think about what we need to do more or less of in a school to meet kind of the needs of the kids. And the questions here, if I make a plan, I can usually work it out. I mostly have control over what happens in my life, etc., etc. This was about a 70 at this school, and you see the distribution. And I don't know about you, I can't resist the chance to look at that really large, you know, over half of the kids are kind of in that below average zone. Like this might be one of those areas that surfaces for a school as, oh, this is what our kids are kind of feeling out there. Okay, so maybe we open up discussion about this. Maybe this becomes a priority area. Or in cognition, positivity in the face of challenge. These sorts of questions, again, about the student, not really necessarily the student-teacher relationship or interaction. I stay positive even when I'm facing challenges. I don't let challenges discourage me. When something is hard to learn, I tell myself I'm getting better at it. This one is notably lower than the other categories. Again, probably surfacing one of those areas where maybe we want to work on our messaging when it comes to how to remain positive, or reframing what challenges and failures and mistakes are in the learning process, or and so on. So I hope just kind of that very quick tour, you get an idea of the sorts of information that the survey can provide for you in your school, your decision making, your priority of action. And basically it looks like this. Well, all of those system pieces that I mentioned, so like the professional learning, the survey, the guidebook and the activities and those things, they kind of all work together. And they kind of fit into this puzzle. Okay, so if we have the motivation research kind of at the heart of things, that informs the professional learning that a staff would do. Then you give the student survey to get kind of to get the student perspective on all of those pieces. That can inform just which practices and activities you want to emphasize and build out, and then the student post-survey kind of lets you know how you did with all of it. It's all the pieces in those concentric circles kind of link up. At the same time, there are some schools that we work with that are really just using one part of the system, like the survey, for instance. It can give you good information, for sure, but just remember, and this is just kind of an assurance or a caveat I want to throw out there, is that when you use any of the system pieces without knowledge of the other ones, or without doing kind of professional learning in between, they can feel a little standalone like this. Okay, we're watching schools get good information out of the survey, no question, but it's kind of it starts to click basically when you're connecting all of the other pieces. So I just kind of wanted to show that graphic to remind that it's kind of a system of stuff. Now Now, as far as where we're doing this and how it's going, we launched this past year. It's really been in development for a couple of years, but we launched this past year in a dozen schools over Minnesota. We are very fortunate to have had great partners in this process. And they're 12 schools, and they are the most diverse range of 12 schools you'll ever hope to see. There are outstate schools, there are metro schools, there are big publics, small charters, independent schools, uh, you name it. It's been a great group of schools to work with, just because it's given us a really diverse picture of how this can look in many different types of settings, and I think really sped up the development of what we have prepared here. Also, as I say, there's been a lot of implementation assistance that's come along with it. A lot of these schools, in my time with them, have started to figure out how they can go more widely with it than just attending workshops, say, and we are really assisting them in making kind of a design for their school, as opposed to just, we're dropping off guidebooks and you get 3 workshops or something like that. And then something we're definitely working toward is this idea. We're very committed to improvement science principles. We are very intrigued by the idea of schools perpetually learning from and with one another in what the Carnegie Foundation would call networked improvement communities, or NICs. Already a group of our schools, that you see that stick pin in kind of north central Minnesota there. It's not the sort of place we can get to real easily, so we're doing what we can to make sure that those 5 schools can kind of learn perpetually from one another, and so we're assisting and maintaining kind of the network we're building there. So it's kind of what we're doing, and so far I think the schools are really putting it to great use. Now, there's a sample 2-year implementation here. It doesn't look the same for everybody. If you're kind of wondering, okay, I've seen what Reach is built according to. I see what it is. How does it look in my school? This is a sample of what it can look like, where year 1 is kind of a learning year, and a core group is trying it out, and then you move on to year 2, and year 2 is thinking about how to take it more widely. Other staff are getting involved in the professional learning, other staff outside that core origin group, and planning for scale and sustainability, and thinking about how it can continue for a number of years. That's one way it can work out, but we're at this point relatively flexible when it comes to suggesting how that works for schools that work for them. So that's just one way it can look. Now, I'm kind of reaching the end of things, and I know that I've just powered through, and probably the last 30 minutes I've only done the talking. So I just kind of want to throw out there that if you are interested in learning more, we do have a lot of stuff coming up this summer. We have workshops that are held here in Minnesota. If you can arrange to bring a person or 2 or a team, we can certainly we'd certainly love to see it. There's the Strengthening Student Motivation workshop, and that is in June. That's Janice mentioned at the outset that we are giving away a free membership or a free seat at that at the end of this. But that's in June 21 to 23. This one, you're going to learn more fully and more comprehensively about the research base. There's a lot of interactive processing in terms of when we look at the insights from the research, really kind of dive deeply into them in a way that brings some kind of takeaway understandings of those insights, and then start to design some very initial practices based on that research. So like emerging with a plan of these are things I can begin to do in light of that research, whether my school is planning to go widely with this or not. Start getting practitioners who attend, more tools for their toolbox. And then that's a recommended prerequisite for this school-wide Student Motivation Institute. Now, this is focused a little bit more on the school that knows we want to go widely with this, or we have a program, like a school within a school or a grade level or what have you, really targeted for installing this, with Fidelity. This is August 2nd through the 4th, also in Minneapolis. And this is where a school actually gets support and design time to design their school's implementation of REACH. And you work in depth with the REACH resources and planning tools. The research, we kind of take it for granted that that's already been covered if you've been to the above workshop. And we spend more time on now what do you have to do logistically to move this into your school. Everything from planning PD, kind of like the PD cycle for the year, scheduling the activities, prioritizing the activities, and designing monitoring plans as well. And also you kind of reach some consensus as a team. We really suggest that people come to that institute with teams and preferably the team of leaders that will be leading the implementation. Because you're going to reach some consensus on implementation decisions that when you get back to your building, you can say, look, there was a team of 6 of us, more than half teachers preferably, and so with a mixed stakeholder group, this is what we came up with, what was best for the building. And we just kind of have some beliefs about that's a great way to create change, durable implementation, as opposed to just one champion in the building attending it and attempting to engineer it all by themselves. So that's kind of what the nature of those two things are. And I urge you to reach out with questions to Mary, who I mentioned at the beginning, because she is very much our expert on our client relationships. Okay, now with that, we've kind of reached the near the end here, and just kind of like a final Q&A period. We're down to just a couple minutes left. And I appreciate you kind of hanging in there for what was a pretty talk-heavy webinar. But to that end, I have this little, in your facilitation guide, if you downloaded that, you might have seen a formative assessment tool like this, and you feel free to use it, by the way. I've found that it's a really great way to substitute for kind of the dryness of an exit slip. And I picked it up from a friend of mine, and she was right. It's always worked wonders. But it's a triangle, circle, square document. And if you just triangle, circle, square the previous sections, and what that means is in the points of the triangle, write 3 separate points to remember from our time together here. In that center square, you'd write down 1 point that you found squares with your thinking. Like it just landed firmly, and you can get behind that. And as far as an idea still circling, that's something you're not sure about in some way. Like it has not landed. It's just sort of going around and around for you, and you either need more information, a clarification, or what have you. And by the way, if you're using this in your classroom and as a formative assessment tool, put your eyes straight on the circle. When you start going through what kids turn in, you can get a pretty quick idea of the ideas still circling in a room, which ones you need to revisit the next day. You'll see a lot of commonality. So the areas we covered were why we focus on student motivation, addressing motivation's complexity, and that whole framework of REACH, plus that system of resources. And you can feel free by using that process to kind of put something into the Q&A here. If you want to just kind of put into the chat window a point that you're going to remember, a point that's still circling, or something that's squared with you in the chat window, we'd sure love to hear any feedback you could give using that format. And then we will circle back on questions that demand a response. Or you can contact Mary for more info. I have her email again at the bottom. That is Mary S. at search-institute.org.
Thanks so much, Eric. Mm-hmm. So now we're kind of going over the noon hour, or well, noon in Central Time here. But since we we tried to keep this webinar within an hour. I wanted to quickly choose a winner for our free admission to the Strengthening Student Motivation Workshop. And we've randomly chosen a winner, and that is Sylvia Wilkes. Sylvia will send out an email to you to confirm all of this, so thanks for joining us. But since we are going a little bit over, but I'd like to throw a few questions at you, if that's okay, Eric.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so a couple of them here have to do with the age group. Josh said, I'm working mostly with K through 6 students. Are there resources specifically for that range, age-appropriate activities and our conversation templates? And Cynthia asked a similar question, are activities for all ages?
Yeah, great questions. Really, they're geared more for secondary grades. We do have, and by secondary, I mean, and I know that's a little, people are going to interpret that differently depending on the state and city. Here we would call that grades 6 through 12. We have some partners that are working with as low as 5th grade. When they have done that, it's been a little on the high side in terms of reading level. Okay, so that's one just very practical concern, and then I would say that a lot of our research and things like that, I do think it apply for sure to grades below 6. At the same time, I think the main focus has been kind of on that adolescent space. So that's not to say folks haven't taken some of the principles and adapted them, but it's not directly at the younger student.
Okay. So in a few questions here had to talk about diversity in REACH. Candace asks, in developing this, what has been done in terms of consideration of cultural and socioeconomic differences among students and families, and how these differences play out in terms of the REACH framework? And Demita asks, are the 12 schools in Minnesota culturally diverse as well?
The development has been on, and again, I wasn't here for all of the development of REACH, but I can say that there's been a very strong commitment to making sure this has the proper lenses. By no means was it just, for instance, very certain demographics targeted or anything like that. Like, I think an eye toward diversity and equity was always at a premium, and especially because I think this, the idea behind it was really trying to figure out how to address the education enterprises most persistent issues, okay, in terms of gaps. Okay, so it's something that's been a very strong premium of Search Institutes all along. And yes, a great question about the diversity of the folks we served. We are in all of our schools, especially in the metro area, are heavily diverse. There would be maybe one exception to that, but we are 3 are very, typical urban settings. Okay, so like with all of the diversity in terms of socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, that are kind of part of the urban setting.
Okay. And we have a question, is anyone using REACH as an after-school program, and what does that look like? And I don't know if Mary, looks like she had answered that one, but I thought other people may want to know that as well.
Yeah, we've been, there's kind of a separate arm of the REACH resources. It's kind of been in development alongside. We have out-of-school time folks that, mentoring programs that have been using the REACH resources and integrating that into their work. Some of them are connected to schools already, so we have multiple programs that have that working. Now, is there one that's adapted exactly to the out-of-school time setting? Not really at this point, but the folks are the Search Institute's folks that work with the out-of-school time people have adapted it really for their setting in just sort of an implementation support way.
Great. So that wraps up most of the questions I think we have today. And since we're way out of time right now, I want to be conscious of everyone's time limitations. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the discussion and had some questions answered. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact Mary. You see her email address on the screen, and we'll try and get an answer for you. So thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great day. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.